The King of Podcasts Radio Network proudly presents The Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. An apex moment in the world of professional wrestling as we begin episode 608 of the Wrestling is Real podcast. KOP here with you. Here's what we got. Tonight, focus is going to go on to AEW and Impact. The alliance that was built going back to the start of the year. And where we are now, we're culminating in a match that we expected to have happen when it comes to Kenny Omega and Rich Swann, title versus title, at the Impact Rebellion pay-per-view coming up this Sunday. This Sunday, as opposed to Saturday. It's actually moving on to Sunday because they made a change in the lineup. So we got that going for us. Sports Illustrated gave a good story about it and gave a whole detail about it, so let's go and talk about that. So Rich Swann says this match is going to be the biggest match of his career and a pivotal moment for the AEW Impact collaboration, hoping to shake up the wrestling business. So here's what we got so far as we look at it. Justin Purrazzo says now, Kenny Omega is less than a week away from writing a new chapter in wrestling history, the face of AEW, the world champion. In a story arc right now, he's on a mission to collect world titles from different promotions. Sounds like the belt collector that Austin Aries was. Remember that? He's the AAA Mega Champion. He's continuing his expedition now where he's going to defend his title to grab a title at Impact Wrestling's Rebellion pay-per-view this Sunday. So try to add more to his collection and draw a significant pay-per-view buy rate, adding intensity to the AEW Impact crossover, which has not been too much crossed over for the Impact side. As we saw tonight on AEW, we did see an ad for Rebellion in the middle of the show, just a regular paid ad. So that was in there. And they definitely focused on Kenny Omega and Rich Swann for the world title versus title. So that was definitely put in there for people to notice. And it was mentioned on the show tonight by Don Callis. So we have that. People are going to watch if they're aware of the Kenny Omega match. That's what we're looking at right there. That's what's important to note. Is this kind of relationship, these two working with each other, it's not meant to be, we know it's not meant to be anything where the ratings have made much of a difference. Impact Wrestling, they're getting the rub here of doing this show, but when I've looked to see if there were anything that happened that really made a difference in the ratings, well, it's not as if Impact Wrestling stayed focused on that match. Not necessarily. And they've done some things where they've had, sometimes where they've done okay when it comes to numbers. Looking back at Omega's first appearance, it goes back to December 8th. 221,000 viewers. And they've been yo-yoing up and down ever since. It's like they're on a diet. And so after Omega's first appearance, you saw a little bit of a drop-off, continued drop-off, and then leading up to their Hard to Kill pay-per-view, stayed in between. And then after Hard to Kill, 186,000 viewers, and continues across. They didn't really have too much. Now, when Juice Robinson and David Finlay from New Japan made the appearance, their first appearance on Impact, it did draw almost 200,000 viewers once again, which is the basis of what we're trying to get at. Now, we saw the ratings had gone very similar as low as 116,000 viewers March 23rd. And then the switch to Thursdays. First night, 168,000 for the first Thursday episode. And Omega was in action. And 132,000 viewers last week. We have the Go Home show coming up now. So the ratings have not really been any different. And I don't know what it is about Impact Wrestling and just what the ratings are, but they just go up and down. There's no consistency to it much at all, because you really do either see a rise or a drop in ratings between 75 and 100,000 viewers on a regular basis. Sometimes not so much, but they're in between 200,000 viewers. That's it. Compared to NXT, which is now pulling over 800,000 viewers. Dynamite 1.2 million this past week. Can it do another million viewers? We'll find out. Raw on the regular, 1.8. SmackDown over 2 million. I mean, it's not pulling It's pulling the numbers it was getting before when it came to when the show was on Destination America or when it was on when it was Pursuit, it wasn't really doing much at all. I'm trying to think what was the other channel was on. No, that was pretty much it. Destination America, again, the moving around of the show definitely never helped the ratings at all. When it got dropped off a spike, that was the worst part. The Access TV thing, it's also moved around a couple of nights, which hasn't helped much either. But now we're here. They had it Wednesday, then it was Tuesday, now it's Thursday. So inconsistency doesn't help. And that goes for like any TV show. Inconsistency for what night it's going to be on doesn't help much. You just have the diehard audience that's hopefully watching. And as for what Impact Wrestling's done for themselves, leading up to this point, they haven't done much when it comes to when they've brought in some of the stars they brought in that were from the acquisitions they got. The people they had signed after the releases of last year, post-pandemic, all the layoffs that WWE had done and where they were at. I mean, Deonna Purrazzo is probably the best example of somebody that did very well leaving WWE out of the layoffs. She's the best example. Other than that, I mean, can't say much about Brian Myers, can't say anything much about Mack Cardona either. Just not sure what to think. But, I mean, they're not being given any gimmicks where they can't be themselves. And I think that's what's just happening right now is those guys are coming in. They're getting to be themselves somewhat. The Good Brothers have done well. They're working quite a bit now. They're doing better than I think they were in WWE myself. That's what I think. And, you know, that's where things are. Really, who else is there that can be considered that has been brought over that really made a big difference on Impact Wrestling so far? They've gone through a lot of different changes. You know, they've lost some stars. They lost MSK. They lost Taya Valkyrie, who's now in NXT. Both all in NXT now. Tessa Blanchard's been a no-show. It's a shame because she was probably one of the people that was really getting Impact Wrestling on the map again. But she's not landed anywhere. She's been, I guess, considered toxic to work with, which is why we haven't seen her back. And who knows who else could come into the fold. But there hasn't been anybody that has gone anywhere special. And I know that they've done some things where they kind of slowed down on some of the things that we're doing before. You remember we did have Wrestle House that lasted for a couple of, what was it, more than a month, right? So Wrestle House they had through the summer, which was a nice way to go and do something through the pandemic era. It was a very challenging kind of idea. I don't know how well it did on the numbers because we didn't get to see what the ratings were on that. But Impact Wrestling's always been very creative. And who knows if the creativity's been hit or miss. Has Swingers Palace really made a lot of change in the ratings? I don't know. Have the matches made much in the ratings? I mean, they've been consistently putting together and building their shows. What they don't do is they don't necessarily book the shows to where the matches, they're trying to book a very hard, they're trying to aggressively book around ratings on the show itself. They're just booking what shows, whatever matches they want within the card with a main event. But they're not booking hotshot booking either. They haven't been doing that at all. So there's nothing we could say much about what they've been doing with the AEW Impact crossover. This crossover has benefited, I think, more for AEW. And I think the AEW ads they've been putting on there have been highlights. Kenny Omega's appearances have been very good. But that's all we have. And again, we're not going to worry so much about Kenny Omega when he's only been out a couple of times. But when he's been out there, the matches have been good. He was at Hardcore Justice. I don't know how well of a show that did in terms of their pay-per-view. And the other thing, too, is I don't know if those pay-per-views are getting that much of a build or much of a bump anyway. How many people are watching those on a regular basis? If they feel like they're much more of a step up than the one-night-only pay-per-views that we used to have that Impact Wrestling offered all the time. But, I mean, I do catch some of those shows, and that's Hardcore Justice I did not catch. So they're just moving along as they were before. Over the last 4 years, 5 years now. They've been kind of moving along their own trend. Has it made any momentum? Has anybody really caught on that really is a draw to bring people to the show? Well, some stars get to be main eventers, and then they get pulled to the mid-card. As we've seen right now, Eddie Edwards brought to the mid-card after a long run at the top. Sami Callihan also being at the top, also brought down to the mid-card. When there's just certain stars, they just put them into certain feuds, and they just see what those feuds are going to do. Are any of them getting any momentum more than others? I mean, Moose right now is not a factor here, but what else do we have? And also because of the fact that Impact Wrestling is not crossing over any stars to AEW, not as of yet anyway. Would they be willing to let Rich Swann take that world title and win it on Sunday? Could that be a shocker? Could they be building to that? And if they do that, what kind of an effect would it have? Kenny Omega not losing the title on an AEW pay-per-view. Rich Swann would be coming over to AEW holding both belts. And the AEW audience is going to basically say, really? Rich Swann? The guy from WWE? The guy from 205 Live? Really? They're going to say that. That's the perception. We know that. But when you look at it, you got to say to yourself, well, it would shock people. Enough of the diehard fans that are watching, they're not pulling in new fans. I don't think they are. But they are having people watch. They are getting some people watching them of a younger demographic, not much younger. But Impact Wrestling hasn't pulled any stars yet with the star power. I mean, they've been building stars, what they have. Of everybody they have right now, most of them are of their own accord. And they're doing things with them. But again, they do a thing where they're building stars that become good somewhere else. They've played the secondary card. They are now what Ring of Honor was a few years ago. Ring of Honor 2016, 2017, 2018, that was the breeding ground for stars that would go to NXT. Then look what's happened now. Now we're seeing stars from Impact Wrestling making their way over. Now, I don't want to say much about LA Knight making his way over, but I don't know if it was so much his work in NWA that led him to his return to the developmental system in NXT as LA Knight. I would have to imagine that his work in Impact Wrestling is what really drew him to come over to WWE once again. Because he was still running with the Eli Drake character that he had created and basically perfected in Impact Wrestling. He got to mold it and build it there. And now he's here. And that's the number of stars that this company has taken and brought over to that fold. And there are other stars, I'm pretty sure, that WWE could absolutely decide, now that they've done their cleaning of house last week, which if you didn't get a chance to hear, I did an extra special edition of the podcast on Friday after the releases of all the talent that got let go, the 10 stars that were future endeavored from WWE, because now that those stars are gone, we're going to talk about one of them a little bit later on. Some comments that Vince Russo made, so it'll give me a chance to do my impression, kind of sharpen it up. They could bring in some other stars. The fact that they cleaned house somewhat, spring cleaning will leave them room to have some other stars they could also bring on board. They might not be done with bringing more stars up from Performance Center and bringing them in like they do. But they're only going to bring them into the Performance Center. There is nobody on the roster right now, as far as that company is concerned, that they would go ahead and pick off. But the exposure, the spotlight for AEW and for WWE to look at the stars that Impact Wrestling does have that can be polished and brought forward is what you have to consider. Because they have some stars like that. I do think that Willie Mack is somebody you got to keep an eye on. Moose is somebody you got to look at. You have to keep an eye on Jordynne Grace. You got to keep an eye on Deonna Purrazzo once again, now holding on with the title, and she's done very well. You got to think of Rosemary. You got to think of Sami Callihan once again. All of them. There's a very good roster. There's not even a question there. Are they being booked well? They're kind of being booked parity to me. So they'll have a run up and then they'll be brought back down to the middle. But Impact Wrestling, for my bargain, much like AEW, they do a really good job with their mid-card. The mid-card feuds get a lot of attention. More attention than the main event feuds, for that matter. Because we know that with the less exposure of Kenny Omega every week, that without a world title being focused on that, I mean, they haven't done much in-ring stuff, and Rich Swann has only competed so much. That has to do anything with the feud he's in. He's been, in other matches. Probably took some of the focus away. Now, they did do the press conference last week, which was good. People were talking about it afterwards. And people are going to be keeping an eye on this pay-per-view. Is going to be very important once again because of how things turned out when Kenny Omega arrived at Hard to Kill. And then we come to this point where we can see what they're going to be doing next. What will happen now? Third wrestling match for Omega on Impact Wrestling. This match has now been elevated for a number of reasons. We talked about last week. On Friday, Mauro Ranallo is going to be calling the match. The Big Fight Field just got the Big Fight announcer. And if Mauro Ranallo is going to do this match, and it won't be Matt Striker, that's a better move. Because I don't think there's anybody in the announcing run of Impact Wrestling where Matt Striker or Josh Matthews, for that matter, would really give enough credence to be calling that match. I mean, Matt Striker in Lucha Underground and kind of doing what he does here in Impact Wrestling, it works. It's good for what it is. He's not really, he feels like he just kind of fits in where Josh Matthews left off. I don't think Matt Striker and D'Lo Brown really do anything more. They just kind of give background and some context. But I don't feel like Matt Striker is hurting the product, nor is he doing much to elevate the product either. Because Matt Striker's kind of just worked off of that like he has. Now, in Lucha Underground, I think he probably got more direction as what he had to go and do to get the stars over. Plus, the moveset that was going on was so exciting. And the crowd they had there in the temple, Matt Striker had to stick to the match in the ring. But we know he goes off on the tangents. He kind of goes off and then starts going into some diatribes that will kind of not make sense. That was what he did in WWE as well. It's what we get from Matt Striker. I always thought it was better as the color guy as opposed to the announcer, but I thought his work in Lucha Underground was very good. He really fit the part. He did really well doing that show, and we're kind of getting the same performance out of him now, and that's adequate. That's good. And the one thing we don't want is for it to be bad, and it's not. It's not really that bad at all. So to have this match, and Mauro now going to call what will probably be a good 30-minute match. I hope it'll be longer, given what they're going to do on the card this weekend. 8 matches on the card. I don't know if one of those matches are going to be a pre-show match, but some of these matches will not have to go long. They might have some matches that might go about 8 to 10 minutes. And some others might not have to go so long, but they're going to have to give a lot of time for that Rich Swann Kenny Omega match. That's just important. The booking of that match is crucial. And Rich Swann could ultimately become a bigger star out of this. Can he get over? Or will he get over in a loss to Kenny Omega? Can Kenny Omega make a good rub on to Rich Swann to really make him stand out? As somebody that Kenny Omega, he had to go toe-to-toe with Rich Swann for like 30 minutes, 40 minutes, whatever it might be. And Rich Swann gave the fight of his life. I mean, Rich Swann's was never booked well outside of Impact. Impact has done a very good job with him. The story that initially came through of him getting hurt and dealing with Eric Young after he came into that match, the contendership match, was it back at was it Slammiversary last year? And remember, he came back from injury and he found his way back. His promos have never been so on point. He's been good leading up to this match. And having Mauro Ranallo doing the lead up to this match as well is a good thing. But it's going to be how the match ends up. And the way they booked it Hardcore Justice with Swann getting the pin, creating the seed of doubt, was important. But you're going to have some new fans that are going to be watching, or some fans that have been very lazy viewers. I'm not saying in a bad way. I'm just saying casual viewers are going to be watching this show. And they're going to be very critical. And, of course, they're already going to have a chip on their shoulder because this is TNA. They're never going to get past the fact this was TNA, the home of Jeff Hardy stumbling at Victory Road. They're going to say it's the show where Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff took another payday off of Dixie Carter. And Dixie Carter was just kind of running the show and letting Jeff Jarrett do whatever he wanted. The six-sided ring, the King of the Mountain match, Orlando Jordynne. Yeah, pick what you want. They're going to complain. They're going to bitch about it. The casual fans, of which you know I have not been. For as long as I've done this show, I've been pretty consistent about TNA and Impact Wrestling, and I've always given Impact Wrestling the chance. I never put these guys in the grave. Never did it. Because my philosophy is always to go ahead and build up the other promotions in the hopes that they will make WWE become competition. They will be forced to act like they have competition, and they will be forced to be motivated to do something to avoid. That's what's important. So it's important to not this weekend that this show does well, because if AEW can get anything out of this, I think the benefit's still supposed to be for Impact, but this is the real true sign of the impact of what this alliance will be. What kind of a headline are they going to get? This is several weeks removed from WrestleMania, and now a spotlight's here. The apex of this alliance right now. A crucial match for both, for this to go well. If they can get people talking about Impact Wrestling and Rich Swann in this match, and also put a spotlight because of the main event, if it causes people to watch the undercard and watch all the matches leading up to it. You have to remember, we have some good matches coming up leading into the night anyway. You got some really good matches in general. I'm going to tell you, the standout matches to me, you have to keep an eye on Trey Miguel, Sami Callihan. I feel something good about that. The story's been good there. Those guys are going to do well together. Probably be a bit of a hardcore feel to it, because just what Sami Callihan gives to every match. The Impact X Division title is the championship matches are very good. Very good. Ace Austin defending against TJP and Josh Alexander. That will be... people will stand out for that match. That's going to be talked about. I think that'll get a good review from people. I think people are going to like that match. Deonna Purrazzo, Tenille Dashwood. The Tenille Dashwood character have not cared about, but Tenille Dashwood can be carried to do a good match. I think Deonna Purrazzo really wants to make sure that Tenille Dashwood does really good tonight on Sunday night. That should be a really good match. And we're going to see a little bit of interference, a little bit of plunder with Kettle with a K, and Deonna Purrazzo will have Susan and forget who else. And Havoc, not Havoc. Kimberly, that's right. Forget about. There's a lot of characters on that show. Then FinJuice for the New Japan factor, and for the hardcore fans, Finlay and Robinson versus Good Brothers, World Tag Team titles. That's going to stand out. But we know that the Rich Swann Kenny Omega match is getting built up. Now, are they going to run that Mauro Ranallo package leading up to that match on Impact? They should. Put some time into that. Build it up. I want to see that. Overall, it's not a bad pay-per-view. The undercard's not bad. The mid-card matches they have are pretty good. I don't think we're going to have any matches that are going to really stink up the place. So, we're keeping an eye on things. Now, let's look at the Rebellion pay-per-view coming up this weekend and see how it's going to do. Now, keep in mind, I will be doing a post show on Sunday night after Rebellion to talk all about it. I know a lot of people like when I do Impact Wrestling post shows because I know what I'm talking about because I watch this show every week. It's like I don't get to watch all the pay-per-views that they do on Impact Plus, but I like what they do. And I'm somewhat of a fan of the product. I like the stars they have there. I'm a little bit on the fence about the booking, but then again, it doesn't have a whole lot. There's not a whole lot of resources they work off of. There's only so much of a production budget they have. And the storylines they have are pretty simple. They're sometimes a bit cookie cutter for my taste. But that's not bad, that's okay. It feels a little bit cheap sometimes, but I'm not saying it's bad. And sometimes I don't mind it. They're just doing what they can to keep it interesting. And they don't have the production budgets that AEW or WWE have. So that's okay. And they can only do so much in the Nashville studio in the first place. But they are being creative. Put it like this. MLW has a less of a budget. And they also keep it really creative. I don't know how they've done it, but they continue to do things that are pretty impressive on how they make the show look. Like when they did the Filthy Island thing with Tom Lawler and they went to Hawaii, that didn't look that bad. And the way their matches are, the way their setup is, it's pretty good. I would keep an eye on MLW as well. But we'll talk about that in a few minutes because they did make the announcement about Vice TV. I'll bring it up now. The MLW is going to go to Vice TV and they're going to start May 1st. So I don't know anything more than that. And that's all we know from Court Bauer. But I'm glad that MLW is getting a bigger platform. Now, they're going to start introducing the audience to the stars again. They got to do what they did like they did on BN Sports when it moved over. That's okay. So they have to do that, reintroduce to the audience, a newer audience, hopefully that's going to be watching on Vice, and see how people will go ahead and turn out and watch MLW, which also has a very good roster. Which you already know I like that show a lot. Dick Contra's great. Joseph Samael's hell of a mouthpiece. Jacob Fatu, that guy could be a star anywhere. He, underrated star. Jacob Fatu, as world heavyweight champion now in MLW, is underrated. Because that guy could work at a lot of different places. I mean, you might not think so, but I think that guy, I think him with Samael would be a hell of a run in WWE. It would be like another Umaga, but a better version. And that's not a shot to Umaga. But imagine if Fatu came in to that company. Oh, forget about it. Put him in there, he's going to just stand out. I mean, if you just put him in NXT, that's just going to be a standout altogether. But they can never take Contra Unit with them. Because Contra Unit is going to be an MLW thing. Plus, we know that MJF, my first exposure to MJF came from MLW, and he was great there. He's only gotten better in a couple of years. But the dynasty he left behind, his two compadres. Hammerstone he's a hell of a babyface. He's good. I like him. He's strong as shit. And Richard Holiday, I feel like he's also underrated. I like his work. I like the whole thing with the AirPods. I like the lawyer/father. I love all that. I think it's a great gimmick. And some of the throwback stuff that Court Bauer throws into with the Dirty Blondes and the match they had with Los Parks. And La Park is still working out there and just kicking ass. And not knowing the whole Azteca Underground kind of thing, they're just doing stuff that's really interesting and cool there. And sometimes I don't get some of the stars they bring in. But again, Court Bauer, I said but again, but Court Bauer does take chances on people. Calvin Tankman is an experiment, I feel like. Calvin Tankman, if he goes somewhere else, he's going to be in some different shape. Probably has to tighten up a little bit. But he's good. He's agile. He's versatile. He is a throwback. So I like him for that. But if another company takes him on just for his shape, they're going to want to try to get him a little more stocky, a little more built up, a little more muscle on him, not so flabby. They're going to say that. I don't care, but I understand where they're going to come from with that. And I guess because watching the WWE like we've had for so many years, we're kind of just accustomed to chiseled, jacked, and kind of features. Meanwhile, when you see Otis last year, we not only had to see his gut out because they wanted to make a point. Look, it's the fat guy. Because there always has to be one of every type in that company. That's just the way they want to work it. One big guy, one fat guy, one this, one that. That's how they have to do it. It's like they're just replacing stars from the Attitude Era with not even carbon copies. Not even facsimiles close to what those stars were back in the day. Back to Rebellion. So let's go to the match card as it stands right now. Fire and Flava, Kiera, Hogan, and Tasha Steelz versus Jordynne Grace, and a partner to be determined. I don't think we've seen who that's supposed to be yet. But we know that they did a deal with Jazz retiring from wrestling, and they put a whole ceremony about that. Okay. I'm just wondering who they could bring in that'll be part of this. Could Selena Vega come off of contract? Is her 90-day clause done to where she could go ahead and be a part as Rosita and come back into Impact Wrestling? I don't know. We know that Impact Wrestling is looking for other stars. They're looking for more Mexican talent. We heard that going on as well from Conan. Was reading about that. And if that's the case, to bring some of the Mexican stars back into the fold, why not bring Andrade into the fold as well? Let him come in. Because that would be interesting. So, in the matches we have coming up, let's look at it. 8-man tag, well, like I said, Fire and Flava versus Jordynne Grace, Knockouts Tag Team Championships. I don't know who Jordynne Grace is going to get. I'm going to guess, because I don't know who they would have. That would be, I guess Taylor Wilde. That's the only person I can think of. They already announced she was going to be coming in soon, the former Knockouts champion. So I'm going to say Taylor Wilde. And I'm going to say Fire and Flava win and retain the Knockout titles, tag titles. I like Fire and Flava. I like the team together. They don't have to have the belts, but I think they still hold on to the belts here anyway. 8-man tag team match, Violent by Design. The faction now of Eric Young, Diener, Joe Doering, and Rhino. This has been good. It's been okay. It's been fine. I've enjoyed it so far. Eric Young with this new faction here has been pretty interesting. It's just a bit of a hodgepodge, though. But we're going to get to see all these guys together. A pretty good team on the other side. Eddie Edwards, Willie Mack, Chris Sabin, and James Storm. I'm going to say the faces win. Sami Callihan versus Trey Miguel in a last man standing match. This probably will go about 15 minutes or so. They're going to have to do quite a bit of things. This is going to be your hardcore match of the night. And I'll say Trey Miguel wins. Sami Callihan doesn't mind letting guys go over him. That's for sure. Brian Myers versus Matt Cardona. I don't like this match at all. It's a match I don't care about. I know they've done some things with these guys a little bit here and there, but I've not paid attention. Because they're just extensions of what they were. Their characters are out of work WWE superstars. Their stories have been they're trying to find a name for themselves once again. I don't care about that move. I mean, the fact that they have him here in this company doesn't mean much to me. But I'm going to guess that Brian Myers wins. I think they have something more for him down the line. I'll say Deonna Purrazzo wins over Tenille Dashwood. I just don't know who you have that takes on Deonna Purrazzo next. Because she's taken pretty good on the roster so far. So who do you have facing off with the Virtuosa after this? Don't know. But I'll say she wins. I'll say I'm going to think that TJP is going to win the X Division title over Ace Austin and Josh Alexander. I'm going to take Finlay and Robinson. I'm going to take them over the Good Brothers for the Impact Tag Team titles. Or actually, you know what? I'm going to change that. I think Good Brothers get the belts back. And I'm going to say Kenny Omega wins the world title and will hold the AEW and Impact world titles. Nothing against Rich Swann, but what I want to see is we don't see the AAA Mega title with Kenny Omega on AEW. But I have to believe that he will carry the Impact World title into AEW. And this will cause Impact stars to come into the space to grab that belt back. That's what I think. Now, we could say that with Kenny Omega becoming the champion, that's going to take away some spots from other people that might be going after the belt. You could have Moose as a contender right now, but he's not. Ace Austin could also be a contender, but he's not. Willie Mack could be a contender, but he's not. So we can wait and we can determine where they're going to go with things after this pay-per-view, but I don't mind too much. It's a good card. Build on the card alone. The build-up has been fine. I want to see what the go-home show looks like. Kenny Omega, Rich Swann, this cannot be looked at as a one-match show. I hope it's not. I hope to say that we had 3 or 4 matches that really stood out. And those with a TNA bias, I don't want to hear from you. I don't even want to hear about it. Because I know there are some out there, podcasters that used to work for Fight Network and they have a bitter grudge against the company, so they're going to be biased anyway. There are others that are going to have their TNA bias. They're never going to let that past them. It doesn't matter. I don't look at this company as TNA. I don't. It's different. They might be showing old TNA clips. They have the library. That's what Fight Network has. But they are trying to build this company into something different, and it is. Ultimately, this company has gotten in a different way. I like where they are now. It's good. And they could do better. My thing is, they're only going to go so far getting themselves over within their own bubble, which is why the AEW rub here ultimately should be able to help Rich Swann carry himself up. Do I want to put a percentage as to how good of a chance Rich Swann has of upsetting Kenny Omega? I wouldn't be against it. I don't think that's what AEW wants to do. It would look, the wrestling fans, the mainstream wrestling fans, the bubble, the IWC would probably look down if Rich Swann won the title. Was able to pick up the AEW title along with the Impact title. Yeah, I get that part. They're going to say, well, who did Rich Swann beat? Why is he getting this opportunity? Why did he all of a sudden get here? I mean, he's just the man at the time with the belt. I don't know. I'm not sure what to think. But I want to give it a chance. I mean, if Rich Swann does win it, I'll give it a chance. I want to see where they want to go with it. You obviously are going to leave us with a cliffhanger on Wednesday and Thursday night. My God, you're going to do that. But I really enjoy Don Callis talking up Kenny Omega. It's been wonderful. It's been very good. Just want Impact to do better. I want them to do better just as much because they have a legacy that has preceded them where they could find their way back up to a better level pretty quickly because they have an audience that could come back to watch them again. And this pay-per-view should give some people credence to say, you know what? I've been on the fence about watching TNA again. I'm going to watch them now. I'm not going to call them TNA anymore. I'm going to give them the respect they deserve. I'm going to call them Impact Wrestling. They could do that. And I would love for some fans to change their minds about it. Now, if we get some fans out there, they're going to start talking all of a sudden about, oh, but I've always been with TNA. No, you haven't. No, you haven't. Don't lie about it. I have a track record on this program. 608 shows. Trust me, I've talked about Impact Wrestling on the show. I've talked about all their pay-per-views since 2012. No question about it. You all know that I support Impact Wrestling. I support MLW. I support Ring of Honor. And I need to get myself back into NWA, but it's been a little bit tough to get back into, finding them over on Fight TV. Because if they're not on YouTube, it's just kind of tough for me to remember to go over and get the Fight TV app and go watch. It really is. But I should go back and see what they've been doing. Missed a couple of episodes so far. I have to catch back up. But I wish this AEW Impact Alliance some hope. I hope for the best here. I want this to be good quality. I want people to have a positive response to this weekend. So I am rooting for AEW and Impact this weekend. I really hope things turn out well. So like I said, I will do a post-show after Rebellion right here, WrestlingIsReal.com. I'll hope you go and check it out for yourselves. All right, let's go ahead and move into a couple of other things that are going on right now in the news and WWE, because I can't just do the whole show about it. Of course, I have to talk about the big major leagues here, right? Got to talk about the WWE. One story that got brought up for the likes of Wrestling Observer and other places was, how well did WrestleMania do as a show itself, the business side of it? There's a couple things on the business side I wanted to focus on. One of the things that I didn't talk about much yet is the fact that the WWE is looking to do a show in Saudi Arabia at the end of 2021. So we're going to get back to that again pretty soon. Just keep an eye out for that. So how many tickets did get sold for WrestleMania 37? Well, we learned about it. Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics got access to the records for WrestleMania from the Tampa Sports Authority, who manage Raymond James Stadium. According to their paperwork, 40,806 tickets were sold collectively for both nights at WrestleMania 37, $6.2 million on the gate. According to the records, 18,320 fans attended night 1, 18,924 for night 2. And that WWE had announced they were going to sell 25,000 tickets for each night at WrestleMania, and then later announced a live attendance of 25,675 for night 1, 25,675 for night 2. So they pump up the numbers. They always do this. But now, the real numbers that we're showing right here that we're learning about from Tampa Sports Authority. First of all, we know that we're ticket brokers that bought a lot of tickets hoping to jack the prices up because people were... When you're thinking about, we haven't had a live wrestling show in a long time in Tampa. There's a crowd that's going to be clamoring to come to this show. We don't have the big WWE shop experience. We don't have the wrestling shows that are all over Tampa in preparation. We didn't have, like we did last year, we were going to have shows that were planned, but all got canceled. And again, the same thing happened this year. See, I did and again, but that was a proper usage. That wasn't a crutch. So they did this without any other events going on like there would normally be in Tampa for WrestleMania weekend. So people came to the show. They were there. It's not a bad crowd to have. Raymond James Stadium normally seats 65,000, and then you're counting the ground floor. So add an extra 7,000 there. So they probably got 20%, 25% capacity total. And yeah, you can complain about, the social distancing and the masks. You know what? They were all in kind of pods. It's the same idea where AEW does it at Daly's Place, home of the Jags. It was fine. The show did well for what it was worth. They pulled about as many people as you could have seen for the Super Bowl a few months before. It was fine. And WrestleMania made some money. It made a lot of money, as a matter of fact. So they're going to come out of it pretty successful. Now, the other things going on throughout the night, the city of Tampa will get some kind of a bump off of that, but not much as they could have gotten if WrestleMania could have been done without a pandemic. We would have had the normal setup we had of live shows before all this happened. Also keep in mind that the ticket prices were much different this time. Ticket price for WrestleMania 37 was $190 average. Far smaller than most recent editions of WrestleMania. The last WrestleMania attended by fans was WrestleMania 35 in 2019. Average ticket price was well over $50 higher. Now, it did pull in a bigger gate than WrestleMania 27 in Atlanta, WrestleMania 26 in Phoenix, and those were single-night events compared to 2 nights, though there were sold-out stadiums. So that's not bad. And if you don't ever follow, there's always times where tickets are sold and people don't show. So they sold out both nights of WrestleMania. That's what they did. And they could have probably put out more tickets if they wanted to. And who knows if people would have gone, more people would have bought tickets if the ticket brokers were not trying to make a quick buck and trying to jack the prices so high to make it where you're trying to get people to go and come back out to go to a show. They're not going to just pay the high scalp prices like they normally do. The pandemic is not completely gone yet. We still got people that want to get vaccinated. We still want people that want to feel like it's normal again. Well, we're not there yet. And people got to wear masks. So people might not want to go to the stadium. Right? That's what's got to be considered. But they did that, and it was stupid. A story that we would normally not hear on most other wrestling shows, but as you know, Wrestling is a Real podcast. We talk about things in real life that WWE does on the business side that I think are important. It might not be what everybody else wants to hear. I'm not talking about banter about, Charlotte Flair getting suspended for indefinitely from her actions on Raw. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm not going to talk about Saray's debut in NXT. No. Hell, I'm not even taking time to talk about the matches that happened on Dynamite tonight, which I liked all the promos tonight. Thought Jericho did really good. MJF did really good. Blood and Guts is getting a nice build. Darby Allin also looking strong. Hell of a match with Ricky Starks and Adam Page. Although Ricky Starks, I was kind of concerned of that shot he had where his head fell to the floor straight after a move from Page. I was kind of concerned about that. But I'm not going to talk about that. I want to talk about this from Hollywood Reporter. So I talked about Nick Khan, the president right now of WWE, the guy that was basically responsible for getting the deals for SmackDown on Fox and the new deal for Raw on NBC Universal and the deal with Peacock. I'm going to give him claim for all that. So he was a big guy at CAA, Creative Artists Agency, headed originally by Michael Ovitz, one of the most powerful Hollywood talent agencies of all. One of the big 3, which is now this big 4. And now it's not even that so much because those big agencies have kind of broken up. But that's besides the point. Because what Nick Khan's done, well, Nick Khan looks like he's bringing some players from Hollywood into the fold as well. 2 former CAA agents are now going to come in to expand revenue streams. So they're looking for more money. And here's what we got. WWE wants to get into the red-hot non-fungible tokens, or NFTs, and audio content markets. So now they have 2 agents, what I'm sure Nick Khan has to have his hands on getting these guys on board. Scott Zanghelini and Alex Varga. Zanghelini will be head of revenue strategy and development for the company. Varga, VP of revenue strategy and development. So, money makers. Money makers. Or basically rainmakers. That's what these guys are. It's not about the content, folks. We know content is content. That's what WWE's been doing. Is it quality content? Not all the time. When it steps up for WrestleMania, it gets better. But when it's not WrestleMania, it's not so much. But it's not stopping WWE for doing things that are not wrestling related, but living up the legacy of who they are with NFTs and audio content. So let's talk about it. Varga tells the Hollywood Reporter, quote, the content business is shifting on a weekly, if not daily basis, so it's incumbent upon all of us here at WWE to be ahead of the curve in terms of what's next and to be there before it begins. And that is what we hope to help with. So the company is beginning to explore new opportunities in some emerging businesses, including blockchain-based NFTs and audio content like podcasts. Now, we know that WWE's already been doing a lot of content in terms of their video content with The Bump, with Up, Up, Down, Down being a part of them, and other social media content they've been doing on a regular basis. So WWE has dabbled in both areas, but they still see them as growth opportunities. Zhang Halini says, quote, helping with revenue growth on the global platform WWE has built to date. We expect to see continued opportunity in emerging areas, including audio content, NFTs, memorabilia, and social gaming. The prominence of these social and digital channels will continue to fuel further new revenue streams as well as allow for category expansion in all areas. And they're looking to reposition themselves, WWE is, for an increasingly cross-platform media world. Now, this is important because we know that the focus is not so much television. We don't really pay attention as wrestling fans as much to the other content that's being cranked out by the company because of how we think of it as propaganda. But what will this be is the question. So while it was early in the direct-to-consumer streaming space with WWE Network, it struck a deal with NBC Universal to move all of its content to Peacock. The agreement complements the company's TV deals with NBC Universal and Fox, including live coverage of events like WrestleMania, which was held earlier this month in Florida. As I said just a minute ago, Varga and Zhang Halini are joining their former CAA colleague Nick Khan at WWE. Khan, who had been the co-head of TV for the agency, was named president last August for WWE, executing the company's new strategy, and he's represented WWE in their negotiations with TV partners. Zhang Halini said, quote, Nick always took the time as a senior agent to give us feedback and invest in our careers when we were first starting out. We established a relationship and rapport with him that carried over to present day. So when we were presented this opportunity, it was a no-brainer to join him and the entire WWE team, considering that all that the organization has been able to build to date. What is amazing about this is, look at the way they make money on everything else except the on-air product. But this is smart company strategy. Nick Khan, these CEA guys, they're smart because they're making money even if the content is mediocre or subpar at best. That's what's incredible. What needs to happen is that this kind of innovation, this kind of drive, this is what's being done on the outside, in the digital and social space, on the business side, on the programming and content side. This is not rubbed off yet. And I once again cry out to Nick Khan, please infiltrate the writer's room. Change the dynamic there. What do you have to do? Get Vince McMahon out to be a chairman emeritus. Get him off day to day. Get Kevin Dunn out. Get Bruce Pritchard out. Let's do something else. I don't know what you do to keep a wrestling component or somebody with a wrestling mind in there and stays in without shaking the apple cart and being able to work nicely. Because for what it's worth, we're at the same spot where WCW was when they kept trying to find out who would be the next person to book the territory. If it was Dusty Rhodes, if it was Bill Watts, if it was Jim Herd. That's where we are. We're at that moment right now. We're in the mid-90s of WCW in that kind of feel. So they don't need so much of a wrestling mind. You might not like me saying this, but an Eric Bischoff-like person, but with not making the mistakes that Eric Bischoff made in his time at WCW. But somebody that could work well and mold between both departments. Somebody that can actually fill the balance right there. That can make that pendulum stay in the middle. A balance. Who is that middle person? Who's the person that's going to be the cross section, the crossover between both the business side and the programming side? Who will get Vince and whoever else in line with the ideas of what WWE is being as a company right now, which is making a whole lot of money. They're bringing in hand over foot billions of dollars. Almost $500 million more than that a year. $500,000. So $500 million. God, that's so much money. So much damn money. And the fact that these CAA guys, that Nick Khan comes in with two new guys that he had under his wing at CAA and brings them in, guys he trusts. He's bringing in a trust circle into this company, which is eventually going to be taking over this company down the line. Because what we don't know is Vince McMahon, I feel like he's trying to hold on to the last bit of his legacy because he knows the corporate end of the company that he built is going to swallow him up. And I don't think people think about that too much. That Vince McMahon, he knows his days are numbered running that company the way he does. And eventually, he's not going to sell the company, but the company's going to make him, they're going to have to out him. They're going to force Vince McMahon out in the day-to-day operations. At some point, it's going to happen. They haven't done it yet because the man did all this shit for 35 years. So he gets a chance. He gets many chances over the last decade to try to right the ship. You give that to Vince McMahon. You allow him to try to get this right. So that's why he's getting the chances he's getting. Plus, the other companies, the other competition isn't hurting him. He's still pulling good numbers for Raw. They might not be the best they were, but they're still pulling ahead of most shows on Monday nights. They're pulling very well on Friday nights for the demographic they're trying to reach. So they're doing that. People are still watching, not even as close to where it was before, but for us to expect 5, 6, 7 million viewers on cable again to watch, that's going to be tough. That's kind of out of the normal thought process. But everything else this company does, outside of programming, it's just their genius. If you're an investor, you look at this company, if you're an accredited investor and you have several $1,000s and you want to buy some stock, well, WWE is what? I'm guessing around $70, $80 right now. I don't know what their stock price has been as of late, but they are doing such good money. Okay, their stock right now, currently, it went up a little bit today, $56. That's cheap. They're at $1.100. Right now, if I look back at what they've been doing this last year, they were up at 57, and they've stayed around $50 for a while now. And there was a time, 2018, they were pulling some big deals. They got up to $100. I don't think they're going to get to that again, but if they could get themselves back to $70, you can make a little bit of money off of them right now. The company's doing fine. Their financials are going to be good for second quarter, or at least the first quarter results when they get back to those in the summer when they have to go and go to that. That's going to do well. The ratings are going to still be a problem. And if Vince McMahon, with every conference call that comes up, if the ratings excuse doesn't pan out to the shareholders, Nick Khan and the rest of that team, they're going to have to make a decision that's going to suck. Like, how do you go ahead and take Vince McMahon out of his role? The company that he built. How do you do that? And not feel some kind of a guilt or some kind of, betrayal, if you will, because this guy is responsible for your jobs. We don't like to think about that as fans, but we should. That's the reality of the matter. It sucks that this is where we are because we want the show to do better. And that's why I haven't worried about the internals of WWE trying to get their ship in line. I don't expect them to. At this rate, I don't expect with Vince McMahon at the helm, running day to day, for them to get where they are. We heard one more time, Vince ripped up the Raw script, and they were running on the fly on Monday. As long as that keeps happening, as long as the stars they have and what they're doing right now continues to be off kilter, as long as Vince is still running things like he does right now, that's where we are. This is why it's important, just like the other times before this. When Vince had competition, Vince was forced to do changes. He had to change with the times. He had to change what wasn't working. That's what was important. That's why, getting back to my original point for the night, the AEW Impact Alliance has to pull off a winner. They have to create magic this weekend. Rebellion has to be, they have to get that match to be over the top. People need to be talking about that when they're watching Raw on Twitter on Monday night and saying, did you see that Omega Swann match? Mauro Ranallo was on fire on commentary. We hadn't heard him in 6 months. He was great. The match was great. The whole thing was great. And people will start talking. The buzz will begin. And other people will go and look for that pay-per-view. They'll watch it, and they'll give Impact Wrestling another chance. And they will pay attention to AEW Wrestling. And I will leave it there. I will be back. God, so much content you guys have been giving you. I'm trying to think how many shows I've already done this month. Well, how many have I done this month? This is ridiculous. I feel like I have not stopped in April. It's been such a busy month. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. This is number 8 this month. We're only 3 weeks in. I've been cranking out the hits for you. So I hope you've been appreciating that. I'll be back this Sunday to go ahead and complete the weekend, and we'll look at Impact Wrestling Rebellion. Enjoy the show. I hope all of you will find your way to watch it, however you're going to watch it. Go order on Fight TV. And I will talk to you this Sunday night for a post-show for Impact Wrestling Rebellion here on the Wrestling is Real podcast, because wrestling needs us. Thank you for listening to the Wrestling is Real podcast. You can find all previous episodes at WrestlingIsReal.com or subscribe to the show on all major podcast outlets, including Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Follow the King of Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at King of Podcasts, and search King of Podcasts on YouTube, or type youtube.com/JBRASCO951. This has been a presentation of the King of Podcasts Radio Network.